let's talk about your childhood. What's the oldest memory you have?
Oh, in my childhood, I remember back when we lived off of Bonnie Bray and 17th Street School, and my grandmother on my mother's side was always sick. She had a heart problem and was always in bed. And I was around 3 or 4 years old, and we had a big stand-up Victrola that we wound up, and I played Valencia for her. Valencia, da 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 da. And I remember that very well, and she used to love it. My grandfather worked at the Angelus Furniture Company, and he would stop by the market on the way home on I believe it's 3rd Street, right across from the Angels flight going up. And that was a big outlet market, and he would bring the food home, big shopping bags of food. And so he did most of the shopping, and he would, when he would come home, and we would see him, my parents lived in a little house behind the big house where my grandparents lived. And when he would come, why, my brother Hector and I would run to meet him as little kids and go into his pockets, because he always had candy there for us, and we'd ask him, "Do you have any candy?" He said no. We put our hands in there and got the candy out anyway.
That's a good one.
That's cute.
I remember that we had a big fig tree in the back, and fig trees are something that you don't see around in the city anymore. They're fruit-bearing figs. It's a fruit. And my grandfather had a great big pole with a can nailed to the pole with a razor of some kind on it, and he would trap the fruit in there and then take it off, and then we'd come up with about 7 or 8 of those figs and peel them back and eat them like peeling some nice delicious fruit. And I remember that there was a pony that they had around the neighborhood, and kids would get on top of the horse and take pictures. And somewhere we have a picture of my brother and I on the horse, and I guess we were maybe 5 and 4 or something like that. My grandmother died, I think, when I was about 4 or 5 years old at that time, of a heart attack. And I remember the ladies, they had a rosary. They would come over to the house for about 5 or 6 days in a row. Certain days that they had, being Catholic, and they would say a rosary and prayers. And then after that was over, then they would have some dessert and coffee or something like that as a toast for being at the house there. That's the thing on my mother's side. On my father's side, I had a lot of uncles and aunts, and we would go generally on Sunday over there to go visit them. And he would be sitting in a chair, and every time we came over, why, we'd come over, give him a kiss on the cheek, and he was like the big godfather. And my grandmother was always very quiet. She was a nice, charming lady, and my 2 aunts, one aunt was about 2 years older than I was. So I had an aunt that was, about 2 years older. Her name was Elia, and Genevieve, another sister of hers, but a little bit older, they would be smoking cigarettes. So when my grandfather would come in the room, he didn't like him smoking, so they give my grandmother cigarettes, and there she's sitting like this, little old lady with 2 cigarettes, and he would come by and look and say, "Oh my God." He knew that they had planted the cigarettes on him. Let's see, I don't recall when he passed away or had died or so forth. But I remember that that when my grandmother died, I was traveling at the time, going on business to St. Louis on trips, and when I came back, why my son Richard with my wife Carmen, they were coming back on the car when they picked me up at the airport, and she told them not to say anything about my grandmother passing away. And we're just halfway home, and they said, "Dad, your grandmother died," and my mother pinched him because he went and told him. I was very sad about that, but she was a charming little old lady, just a typical cast in Hollywood as a grandmother. Well, there's not too much. All my uncles, every one of them was completely different. I had every one of them, and they were brothers, but completely different. All of them. The youngest of the boys, his name was Jack, and he ran track at the high school that I went to, Poly, and he was pretty good at track. He ran distance, like 800 meters or 800. They called it the 800-yard dash at that time, not meters. And let's see. He and a couple of the other ones were artistically very much inclined, and I was always interested in art and doing. They had wood burning sets at the time in which you would get a hot metal thing, electrically thing, and it would burn into the wood and so forth, and it was printed out, and then you would paint it and everything, and you'd paint it, and then I remembered I would sell tickets for it for 10 cents a raffle, and I'd get a couple of dollars from it, and then whoever got it, won it, they would have it, and you know, I think they hanged it up for a little while and then took it out because it was very stock, very not too good, but that was one of my art things, and I always used to be sketching, and so did Hector. We would always be drawing or doing something.
Tell us, now let's get some specifics about your, yesterday you told us the names of your brothers and the ages, how far you were apart. Let's talk about now when you got married, your wife's maiden name, and then the names of your children and how many you had. So
about my wife, where I met her, or what?
No, not where you met her. Your wife's, you married, her name was Carmen. What was her name?
McDonald.
My wife's name was Carmen McDonald. It was Carmen Valdez McDonald, and the name McDonald came from her father, who was from Nova Scotia, and he was down in Mexico, and he met Carmen's mother there, and they got married. And Carmen always used to say that was a match that she didn't understand how they got together, the two of them. I didn't see him ever that much because he was a longshoreman and lived up north, up near Santa Barbara, up in that area, and so I only saw him about 5 times in all our existence. And he always had tattoos because he was a longshoreman, and he said he got drunk and guys were doing tattoos, and he had tattoos on his arms that you couldn't see him unless he rolled up his sleeve. And he told me, he said, don't ever get tattoos, and he told the kids the same thing. But tattoos are now in. I mean, guys have them, gals have them on their necks, faces, everywhere. So I don't believe in the tattoos. I mean, but anyway, that's the way it was. I mean, wouldn't have them. And But therein, like everything else, life has changed completely.
So then let's hear you say, we had how many children,
Okay.
and then go through the...
Okay. Carmen and I were married in December 26th, the day after Christmas, because we could not get married in the church at that time. And that was in 1948. So that was, that day, it just rained, just something terrible that one day. And we had, you generally had, you get married and you generally had the reception at the houses where you got married. And so we went on a honeymoon to, of all places now that after the whole thing was over, we went to Yosemite. Why, I do not know. I mean, because that was snow, we didn't have clothes for it. I don't know why we decided to go there. That was stupid. We used to like to go to the beach. We should have gone to San Diego or someplace else. So we always used to like the ocean. But it was in December, and we thought, well, that'd be good. So from there, from Yosemite, we went to San Francisco and had part of our honeymoon there, and we met a guy that I used to go to school with at Art Center when I was going to art school. I went to the old art school, Art Center, which was located on 3rd Street near Highland. And that was a school that was the top design school in